There I was, standing in my own kitchen, staring at the perfectly arranged place settings for 12 people, when my daughter-in-law, Jessica, decided to drop her little bomb. She waltzed into my house like she owned it, designer purse swinging, and announced that I was uninvited from tonight's family dinner. The same dinner I'd been planning for 3 weeks, the same dinner where my husband Frank was supposed to announce our divorce to the family. Except Jessica didn't know about the divorce part. Nobody did. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about control anymore. This was about to become the most satisfying evening of my entire life. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Hattie Williams. I'm 58 years old, and I've spent the last 32 years of my life being the perfect wife, the perfect mother, and the perfect hostess. I've organized birthday parties, holiday gatherings, and family dinners in this very dining room countless times. I've smoothed over arguments, mediated disputes, and kept everyone's secrets. I've been the glue that held this family together, even when that family included my controlling son Marcus and his manipulative wife, Jessica. But tonight was different. Tonight, I was supposed to be free. Frank and I had been planning this divorce announcement for months. We'd grown apart years ago, but we'd stayed together for the kids, for appearances, for all the wrong reasons. We'd finally decided we deserved better, deserved happiness, even if it meant starting over in our late 50s. The plan was simple: gather the family for what they thought was just another Sunday dinner, share the news gently, and begin the process of untangling our lives with dignity and grace. We'd even prepared a speech together, something about how we'd always love each other, but had grown in different directions. Very civilized, very mature. But Jessica had other plans. She'd been gunning for me ever since she married Marcus 5 years ago. I never understood why. I'd welcomed her into the family, helped plan their wedding, even gave her my grandmother's pearl necklace as a wedding gift. But nothing I did was ever good enough. She criticized my cooking, my decorating, my clothes, my opinion. She'd make little comments about how things were different in her family, how her mother would have done things better. And Marcus, my sweet boy who used to defend me against playground bullies, just stood there and let it happen. The worst part was how she'd twisted everything around. If I offered to help with their new house, I was being intrusive. If I didn't offer, I was being distant. If I bought gifts for their kids, I was spoiling them. If I didn't, I was being cheap. There was no winning with Jessica, and after years of trying, I'd finally stopped playing her game. But this morning, when she showed up at my door wearing that smug little smile, I knew she'd found a new way to hurt me. "Hattie," she said, not even bothering with a hello, "I've been thinking about tonight's dinner, and I really think it would be better if you didn't attend." I stared at her, my hand still on the doorknob, wondering if I'd heard her correctly. "Excuse me? Well, you know how tense things get when the whole family is together," she continued, stepping into my foyer without being invited. "And frankly, your presence just makes everyone uncomfortable. Marcus agrees with me. He thinks it's time we had some family time without all the drama you bring." The audacity of this woman. She was standing in my house, telling me I wasn't welcome at my own family dinner, and somehow making it sound like she was doing me a favor. "This is my house, Jessica," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. "This is my family." She tilted her head, giving me that patronizing look I'd grown to hate. "Oh, Hattie, I know this is hard for you to understand, but families evolve. Sometimes people outgrow each other. Marcus and I have been talking, and we think it's time for you to step back and let us handle family gatherings from now on. We're going to have dinner at the country club instead, much more appropriate for the kind of family we're trying to build." I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab her by her perfectly styled hair and drag her out of my house, but instead, I did something that surprised even me. I smiled. "Of course," I said, my voice sweet as honey. "I completely understand. You're absolutely right. I'll just stay home tonight." Jessica blinked, clearly not expecting such an easy victory. "Oh, well, good. I'm glad you're being so reasonable about this." "I'm always reasonable, Jessica. You know." She lingered for a moment, probably waiting for me to break down or beg, or give her the dramatic reaction she was hoping for. But I just stood there, smiling pleasantly, until she finally left. The moment her car pulled out of my driveway, I locked the door and leaned against it, my heart pounding. Then I started to laugh, not the bitter, angry laugh of someone who'd been defeated, but the genuine surprised laugh of someone who'd just realized they'd been handed a gift. Because Jessica had no idea what she'd just done. She thought she was embarrassing me, isolating me, showing everyone who was really in charge, but what she'd actually done was give me the perfect opportunity to have the most important conversation of my life, without any witnesses. See, Frank didn't know about Jessica's little visit. He was at his office, probably rehearsing his part of our divorce speech, preparing for what we thought would be a difficult evening surrounded by shocked family members. But now, thanks to Jessica's need to humiliate me, Frank and I could have our announcement dinner alone, just the two of us, the way it should have been from the beginning. I walked into the dining room and looked at the table I'd set so carefully. The good china, the crystal glasses, the silver candlesticks that had been my mother's. All of it arranged for a family that apparently didn't want me there. But instead of feeling sorry for myself, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: freedom. I started clearing the table, putting away the extra plates and glasses, leaving just 2 place settings at opposite ends of the long mahogany table. Then I went to the kitchen and looked at the roast I'd been cooking since noon, the vegetables I'd prepared, the apple pie cooling on the counter. Enough food for 12 people, and now it would just be Frank and me. Perfect. I called Frank at his office, and when he answered, I could hear the stress in his voice. "Hattie, is everything okay? I'm just finishing up here before I head home. Are you ready for tonight?" "Actually," I said, unable to keep the smile out of my voice, "there's been a change of plans. Jessica uninvited me from our own family dinner." There was a long pause. "She what?" "She came by this morning and told me I wasn't welcome. Said she and Marcus were taking everyone to the country club instead. Said my presence makes everyone uncomfortable." I could hear Frank's chair creak as he sat back. That manipulative little... He trailed off, and I could picture him rubbing his temples the way he did when he was angry. "Hattie, I'm so sorry. I had no idea she was planning this." "Don't be sorry," I said, surprising him. "This is actually perfect. Think about it, Frank. We don't have to make our announcement to a room full of people. We can have dinner together, just the two of us, and talk about our future without any drama or interruptions." Jessica just gave us exactly what we needed. Another pause, and then Frank started to chuckle. "You know what? You're absolutely right. I was dreading tonight anyway." The thought of sitting through one of Jessica's performances, while trying to explain our divorce to everyone. He laughed again. "This is much better. So you'll come home for dinner. Just us." Wild horses couldn't keep me away. After I hung up, I stood in my kitchen feeling lighter than I had in months. I'd spent so many years walking on eggshells, trying to keep everyone happy, trying to be the perfect hostess and peacemaker. But tonight, I could just be myself. I could have an honest conversation with my husband about our marriage, our mistakes, and our hopes for the future, without worrying about what anyone else thought. I went upstairs to change clothes, trading my carefully chosen dinner party outfit for a simple blue dress that Frank had always said brought out my eyes. Then I fixed my hair, put on some lipstick, and looked at myself in the mirror. I looked like a woman who was about to start a new chapter of her life, and for the first time in years, that didn't scare me. Downstairs, I put on some music, lit the candles, and poured myself a glass of wine. The house felt different somehow, more peaceful, like it was exhaling after holding its breath for too long. Frank arrived home at 6:30, just as the sun was setting. He walked into the dining room and stopped short when he saw the intimate table setting, the candles, the way I'd transformed our formal dinner into something softer, more personal. "This is beautiful," he said, and I could hear the emotion in his voice. "Much better than what we had planned." We sat down to dinner, and for the first time in years, we actually talked. Not about the kids, not about our schedules or responsibilities, but about us. About the early days of our marriage, when we'd laugh until our sides hurt. About the dreams we'd had, the places we'd wanted to travel, the things we'd wanted to do together before life got in the way. "I've been thinking," Frank said, as we shared the apple pie, Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story, about what we want this divorce to look like. I don't want to hurt you, Hattie. Despite everything, I still care about you. I want us both to be happy. I want that too, I said. I think we can do this right. We can be an example of how two people can end a marriage with respect and kindness. We talked about logistics, about dividing assets, about how to tell the children. It was the most honest conversation we'd had in years, and it was only possible because we were alone, without the pressure of performing for an audience. As we were finishing dessert, Frank's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and frowned. It's Marcus. He says dinner at the country club was wonderful, and he hopes I enjoyed my quiet evening at home. Frank looked up at me. He has no idea I was supposed to be there with them. I felt a flutter of satisfaction. Jessica must not have told him she uninvited me. She probably told everyone I was sick or had other plans. Frank's frown deepened. So she manipulated the entire family, made them think you chose not to come, and let them believe I was just staying home to keep you company. That's exactly what she did. Frank set down his phone and looked at me across the table. You know what, Hattie? Maybe we should postpone our announcement. Maybe we should let Jessica think she won this round. I raised an eyebrow. What do you— I mean, maybe it's time Jessica learned that actions have consequences. She wanted to exclude you from family gatherings. Fine, but she doesn't get to rewrite the story to make herself look good. I could see the wheels turning in Frank's mind, and I recognized the expression on his face. It was the same one he'd worn when he was building his business, when he was solving problems, and making strategic decisions. What are you thinking? I'm thinking we don't tell anyone about the divorce yet. We let Jessica believe she's successfully driven a wedge between you and the family. We let her think she's won, and then when the time is right, we show everyone exactly what kind of person she really is. I leaned back in my chair considering his words. That's a dangerous game, Frank. What if it backfires? Then we'll deal with it. But Hattie, I've watched that woman chip away at your confidence for 5 years. I've watched her isolate you, manipulate our son, and poison family gatherings with her drama. I've stood by and let it happen, because I thought it was better to keep the peace. But I'm done. I'm done letting her hurt you. I felt tears prick my eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of gratitude, of something that felt suspiciously like hope. You want to fight back? I want to protect you. I want to show Marcus who his wife really is. And I want to make sure Jessica never gets the chance to hurt you again. We spent the rest of the evening planning, not our divorce anymore, but our strategy. We would continue to live as husband and wife, at least publicly, while we gathered evidence of Jessica's manipulative behavior. We would document her lies, her schemes, her attempts to control and isolate family members. And when we had enough proof, we would expose her for what she really was. It wasn't the evening I'd planned, but it was exactly the evening I needed. For the first time in years, Frank and I were truly united, working together toward a common goal. And that goal wasn't just about getting revenge on Jessica. It was about protecting our family, preserving our relationships with our children and grandchildren, and making sure that the woman who'd tried to destroy us didn't get the last word. As I cleaned up the dishes later that night, I thought about Jessica's smug face when she'd uninvited me from my own family dinner. She'd thought she was delivering a devastating blow, but instead, she'd given me exactly what I needed, the motivation to fight back. Tomorrow, I would start gathering evidence. I would document every lie, every manipulation, every cruel comment. I would reach out to other family members quietly, carefully, to see if they'd noticed Jessica's behavior too, and I would wait for the perfect moment to reveal the truth. Jessica had no idea what she'd started. She thought she was dealing with a weak, defeated woman who would just accept her fate quietly, but she was wrong. She was dealing with Hattie Williams, and Hattie Williams was done being pushed around. The war had begun, and this time, I intended to win. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in decades. Frank had already left for work, but there was a note on my nightstand that simply said, "We've got this," in his familiar handwriting. I smiled as I folded it carefully and tucked it into my jewelry box, right next to the engagement ring I'd stopped wearing years ago. I made myself a strong cup of coffee, and sat at the kitchen table, pulling out a yellow legal pad and a pen. If I was going to document Jessica's behavior, I needed to start with what I already knew. I began writing, starting with the day she'd first criticized my potato salad at Marcus's birthday party 3 years ago, right in front of the entire family. She'd laughed it off as a joke, but I'd seen the calculation in her eyes, the way she'd watched to see how everyone would react. The list grew longer than I'd expected. There was the time she'd accidentally scheduled their daughter's recital on the same day as my book club's charity fundraiser, knowing I'd been planning it for months. The way she'd convinced Marcus to change their holiday traditions, slowly but surely eliminating anything that connected to our family's history. The passive-aggressive comments about my house being so traditional and stuck in the past. The way she'd started calling me Miss Williams instead of Mom or Hattie, creating distance even in casual conversation. Each memory I wrote down revealed a pattern I'd been too polite to acknowledge before. Jessica wasn't just difficult or opinionated, she was strategic. Every slight, every manipulation, every small cruelty was designed to isolate me from my own family, to make me feel unwelcome in spaces where I should have belonged. By noon I had 3 pages of incidents, complete with dates and witness. It was more extensive than I'd realized, and seeing it all laid out in black and white made my stomach turn. How had I let this go on for so long? How had I convinced myself that keeping the peace was worth sacrificing my own dignity? My phone rang, interrupting my thought. It was my younger son, David, calling from his apartment across town. "Hey Mom," he said, and I could hear the concern in his voice. "Marcus told me you weren't feeling well last night. Are you okay?" I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar stab of frustration. Of course that's what Jessica had told everyone, not that she'd uninvited me, but that I was sick. It was perfect, really. It made her look considerate and caring while making me look fragile and unreliable. "I'm fine, sweetheart," I said, choosing my words carefully. "Just needed a quiet evening at home." "Are you sure?" "Marcus said you seemed really upset about something lately. He's worried about you." My heart clenched. Marcus was worried about me, but not enough to ask me directly what was wrong. Not enough to question his wife's version of events. "David, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Have you noticed anything different about family gatherings lately? Any tension or awkwardness?" There was a pause, and I could hear him shifting around. "Well, I mean, Jessica can be a little intense sometimes, and she definitely has opinions about everything. But Marcus seems happy, so I try not to get involved." "What kind of opinions?" Another pause, longer this time. "Mom, are you asking because of something specific?" I realized I was walking into dangerous territory. If I pushed too hard, David might tell Marcus, and then Jessica would know I was onto her. I needed to be more subtle. "No, nothing specific. I just want to make sure everyone feels comfortable at family events. You know how important that is to me." "Yeah, I know." His voice softened. "Look, Mom, if something's bothering you, you can talk to me about it. You don't have to handle everything on your own." The kindness in his voice almost broke my resolve. David had always been my sensitive one, the son who noticed when people were hurting, who tried to fix things before they broke completely. But I couldn't burden him with this. "Not yet." "I appreciate that, honey. I really do. I'm just feeling a little overwhelmed lately. Nothing I can't handle." After we hung up, I stared at my legal pad, feeling the weight of what I was attempting. This wasn't just about proving Jessica was manipulative. This was about potentially destroying my relationship with Marcus, about forcing my family to choose sides, about admitting that I'd been weak enough to let this happen in the first place. But then I remembered Jessica's smile yesterday morning, the pure satisfaction on her face when she'd told me I wasn't welcome. I remembered the way she'd stood in my foyer in my house and made me feel like an intruder in my own life, and I knew I couldn't let it continue. I decided to start with the people Jessica couldn't control, the family members who might have noticed her behavior but felt too uncomfortable to mention it. My sister Carol was the obvious choice. She'd been coming to our family gatherings for years, and she had a sharp eye for social dynamics. I called her around 2 o'clock, catching her just as she was getting home from her volunteer shift at the hospital. "Hattie," she said, sounding genuinely pleased to hear from me. "How are you, honey? I missed you at dinner last night." "You missed me?" "Well, of course I did. Marcus said you weren't feeling well, but the whole evening felt off without you there. You're usually the one who keeps everyone talking and laughing. I felt a flutter of validation. It felt off. Oh, you know how it is. Jessica was in full hostess mode, ordering everyone around, critiquing the service. She actually sent back the wine twice, because it wasn't the right temperature. The poor waiter looked like he wanted to hide under the table. This was exactly what I'd hoped to hear. That sounds stressful. It was, and Marcus just sat there, letting her run the show. I kept thinking about how different it would have been at your house, with your beautiful dining room and your cooking. Everything's always so warm and welcoming when you host. I grabbed my pen and started writing. Carol's observations were valuable because she was family, but not immediate family. She had no reason to lie or protect anyone. Carol, can I ask you something? And I need you to be completely honest with me. Of course, honey. What's wrong? Have you noticed any changes in how Jessica treats me at family events? Any patterns in her behavior? There was a long silence, and I could practically hear Carol thinking. When she finally spoke, her voice was careful but clear. Hattie, I've been wanting to talk to someone about this for months. That woman has been undermining you systematically, and it's me furious. The way she cuts you off when you're talking, the way she rearranges your seating arrangements, the way she makes little comments about your choices. It's like she's trying to erase you from your own family. My hand was shaking as I wrote down her words. You've noticed this too. Honey, everyone's noticed it. But nobody wants to say anything because Marcus seems so happy, and we don't want to cause problems. But yesterday, when she was holding court at that restaurant, acting like she'd always been the matriarch of this family, it was too much. I almost said something. What stopped you? Fear. Honestly. Fear that I'd make things worse for you. Jessica has a way of twisting things around, making herself look like the victim. I was afraid that if I confronted her, she'd find a way to turn it back on you. This was better than I'd hoped. Carol wasn't just confirming my suspicions. She was revealing that other people had been watching this happen and feeling uncomfortable about it. That meant I wasn't crazy or oversensitive. That meant there were potential allies. Carol, would you be willing to write down what you've observed? Not for anything dramatic, just so I have a record. Absolutely. Hattie, I've been keeping mental notes for months. That woman is poison, and it's time someone called her out on it. After we hung up, I felt energized in a way I hadn't experienced in years. I wasn't alone in this. Other people had seen what Jessica was doing, and they were willing to help. I spent the rest of the afternoon reaching out to other family members, always carefully, always subtly. My cousin Margaret, who'd been at Marcus's wedding, remembered how Jessica had changed the seating chart at the last minute, moving me from the family table to a table with distant relatives. At the time she'd thought it was an honest mistake, but looking back, she realized it was deliberate. Frank's brother Tom recalled a Christmas dinner where Jessica had made a point of thanking everyone except me for their contributions to the meal, even though I'd cooked the entire turkey and most of the side dishes. My daughter-in-law Sarah, David's wife, had noticed how Jessica always seemed to schedule important family events when she knew I had other commitments, then acted disappointed when I couldn't attend. Each conversation revealed another piece of the puzzle, another example of Jessica's calculated campaign to marginalize me. By evening, I had a comprehensive list of incidents, spanning the entire 5 years of her marriage to Marcus, witnessed and corroborated by multiple family members. But the most valuable information came from an unexpected source. Around 7 o'clock, as I was making dinner for Frank and myself, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but I answered anyway. Mrs. Williams? This is Rebecca Chen. I work at the Riverside Country Club. I frowned, trying to place the name. I'm sorry, I don't think we've met. No, we haven't. But I served your family's table last night, and I was wondering if I could speak with you about something that happened. My pulse quickened. What kind of Well, I probably shouldn't be calling. But what I witnessed was so inappropriate that I felt like someone should know. Your daughter-in-law, the blonde woman who organized the dinner, she was saying some really terrible things about you to the other family members. I gripped the phone tighter. What kind of things? She told everyone that you'd been having emotional problems lately, that you'd been saying inappropriate things to her children, and that your husband was considering having you evaluated for dementia. She made it sound like you were becoming unstable, and that's why you weren't at dinner. The room seemed to tilt around me. Jessica hadn't just uninvited me and lied about it. She'd actively poisoned my family against me, planting seeds of doubt about my mental health and my relationship with my grandchildren. Are you sure about this? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I'm positive. I was standing right there when she said it. She was very convincing, very concerned sounding. But something about it felt wrong to me. I've worked a lot of family events, and I know what real concern looks like, versus manufactured drama. Did anyone at the table seem to believe her? Most of them looked uncomfortable, like they weren't sure what to think. But the older man, your son I think, he was nodding along. He seemed to really believe what she was saying. Marcus, my own son, was listening to his wife destroy my reputation, and apparently buying every word of it. Rebecca, why are you telling me this? Because my grandmother went through something similar with my aunt. Family members who were supposed to love her started treating her like she was broken, like she couldn't be trusted. It nearly destroyed her. When I heard that woman talking about you last night, I recognized the pattern. I couldn't just stand by and let it happen to someone else. I thanked Rebecca and hung up, my hands trembling. This was so much worse than I'd imagined. Jessica wasn't just trying to exclude me from family event. She was systematically destroying my reputation, my relationships with my children and grandchildren, my standing in my own family. When Frank came home an hour later, I was sitting at the kitchen table with my legal pad, my phone, and a glass of wine that I hadn't touched. You look like you've had a productive day, he said, kissing the top of my head before sitting down across from me. I told him everything. The conversations with Carol and the other family members, the patterns of behavior we'd identified, and most importantly, Rebecca's phone call. Frank's face grew darker with each revelation, his jaw tightening when I got to the part about Jessica claiming I had dementia. That manipulative, calculating. He stopped himself, running his hands through his hair. Hattie, this is character assassination. She's not just trying to control family dynamics. She's trying to destroy your credibility completely. I know, and it's working. Marcus believes her. Our own son thinks there's something wrong with me. Frank reached across the table and took my hand. Then we need to move faster than we planned. We can't let her continue spreading these lies, but if we confront her now without solid proof, she'll just deny everything and claim we're the ones being dramatic. Then we get solid proof. I looked at him, seeing the determination in his eye. What do you mean? I mean, we record her, we get her on tape saying these things, being manipulative, showing her true colors. We create a situation where she can't help but reveal herself. How? Frank was quiet for a moment. Then his face lit up with an idea that was either brilliant or completely reckless. We invite her over. Tomorrow night, just the three of us. We tell her we want to discuss the family situation, that we're concerned about the tension and want to work things out. We make her think she's winning, that she's finally broken us down. And then, we let her talk, we ask the right questions, we give her enough rope to hang herself with, and we record every word. Once we have proof of what she's really like, we can share it with the family. I stared at him, my heart pounding. It was risky, dangerous even. If Jessica suspected we were recording her, she could turn it around on us, claim we were the ones being manipulative. But if it worked, if we could get her to reveal her true nature on tape, it would be the evidence we needed to expose her once and for all. What if she doesn't take the bait? She will. Her ego won't let her resist the opportunity to gloat, to finally tell us exactly what she thinks of us. And once she starts talking, really talking, she won't be able to stop herself from revealing who she really is. I looked down at my legal pad, at all the evidence I'd gathered, at the careful documentation of years of psychological warfare. Then I looked back at Frank, my partner in this strange new chapter of our marriage. Okay, I said. Let's do it. Frank smiled, the same smile he'd worn when he'd proposed to me 32 years ago, full of confidence and mischief, and the absolute certainty that together, we could handle anything. Jessica has no idea what she started, he said, but she's about to find out. The next morning, I called Jessica early, before she had time to fully wake up and put on her usual armor of fake sweetness. Jessica, it's Hattie, I hope I'm not calling too early. Oh, she sounded surprised, and I could hear rustling in the background, like she was sitting up in bed. No, it's fine. What's up? Well, I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, and you're absolutely right. I have been struggling lately, and I think it's affecting the family. Frank and I were wondering if you might come over tonight, so we can talk about it properly. There was a pause, and I could practically hear the wheels turning in her head. Talk about what exactly? About how to move forward, about what's best for everyone. You clearly have insights into the family dynamics that I've been missing, and I think it's time I listen to what you have to say. Another pause, longer this time. You want me to come over to discuss family dynamics. I want you to help me understand how to be a better mother-in-law and grandmother, how to step back when I need to, how to support Marcus and the children without overstepping. You've been trying to tell me these things for years, and I haven't been listening. I'm ready to listen now. I could hear the shift in her voice, the way it softened and became almost gentle. She was buying it completely. Oh, Hattie, I'm so glad you called. I've been worried about you. We all have, and I think it's wonderful that you're ready to have this conversation. Maybe around 7, I'll cook something simple, nothing fancy. Of course I'll come. And Hattie, I really think this is going to help everyone. It takes courage to admit when we need to make changes. After I hung up, I felt a mixture of anticipation and nausea. I just convinced my daughter-in-law to come to my house, so I could secretly record her revealing her true nature. It felt sneaky and underhanded, completely contrary to everything I'd been raised to believe about honest communication and treating people with respect. But then I remembered Rebecca's phone call, the lies Jessica had told about my mental health, the way she'd tried to poison my own family against me. Sometimes when you're dealing with someone who fights dirty, you have to be willing to get your hands dirty too. Frank and I spent the day preparing. We tested the recording app on his phone, making sure it would pick up conversation clearly from different parts of the living room. We planned our approach, the questions we would ask, the ways we could encourage Jessica to reveal her manipulative tactics without being obvious about it. Remember, Frank said as we practiced, she's arrogant. She thinks she's smarter than us, that she's been playing us this whole time. If we can make her feel like she's finally won, like she's finally in complete control, she'll let her guard down, and if she doesn't, then we'll know we tried. But Hattie, I've been watching this woman for 5 years. I've seen how she operates. She won't be able to resist the opportunity to tell us exactly what she thinks of us, especially if she believes there are no consequences. At 6:30, I put a casserole in the oven and set the table for 3. Frank positioned himself in the living room with his phone ready, disguised under a magazine on the coffee table. I checked my appearance in the hall mirror, making sure I looked appropriately humble and defeated. Jessica arrived at exactly 7 o'clock, carrying a small bouquet of flowers, and wearing an expression of sympathetic concern that was so perfectly crafted it was almost impressive. Hattie, she said, handing me the flowers with a soft smile. Thank you for calling. I know this must be difficult for you. Thank you for coming, I replied, leading her into the living room where Frank was waiting. Can I get you some wine, or coffee? Wine would be lovely. I poured 3 glasses of red wine and settled into my chair, adopting what I hoped was a receptive, vulnerable posture. Frank looked appropriately supportive but resigned, like a man who'd finally accepted that his wife needed guidance. So, Jessica said, settling back into the couch and crossing her legs elegantly, where would you like to start? I suppose with an apology, I said. I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about how my presence makes people uncomfortable. I didn't realize I was being so disruptive. Jessica's eyes lit up, just slightly, and I knew we had her. Oh, Hattie, you're not disruptive intentionally, but sometimes, when we're not aware of how our behavior affects others, we can create tension without meaning to. What kind of behavior specifically? Well, Jessica leaned forward, warming to her subject. There's the way you tend to dominate conversations at family gatherings. People want to share their news, their accomplishments, but you always seem to redirect the attention back to yourself or your own experiences. I blinked, genuinely surprised. I do that all the time. And then there's the way you undermine my parenting decisions with the children. When I set boundaries or rules, you find ways to circumvent them. It sends mixed messages and confuses them. Frank shifted in his chair. Can you give us some examples? Of course. Jessica took a sip of wine, clearly enjoying herself now. Like last month when I told Emma she couldn't have dessert before dinner, and Hattie immediately offered to make her a milkshake. Or the time I said the children needed to limit their screen time, and Hattie set up a movie marathon in the basement. I felt my temper flare, but I forced myself to stay calm. I was just trying to be a fun grandmother. I understand that, but you have to realize that when you contradict my parenting in front of the children, you're teaching them that my authority doesn't matter. It's confusing for them, and disrespectful to me. I never meant to be disrespectful. I know you didn't, but that's part of the problem, Hattie. You don't seem to be aware of how your actions affect other people, like the way you always insist on hosting major holidays, even when other people offer to help or take over. I enjoy hosting, I said weakly, but do you ever consider that other people might enjoy hosting too? That maybe Marcus and I would like to create our own traditions, have our own family gatherings. You've been controlling the family narrative for so long that you can't imagine stepping back and letting other people take the lead. I glanced at Frank, who was looking appropriately chaste. Inside I was seething. Jessica was rewriting history, painting my love for my family, and my desire to bring people together as some kind of controlling behavior. You're right, I said, forcing the words out. I never thought of it that way. Jessica's smile became warmer, more genuine. She was clearly feeling confident now, convinced that she was finally breaking through to me. And then there's the way you guilt-trip people when they don't meet your expectations. Like when David missed your birthday dinner last year because of work, and you made that comment about how family should come first. It made him feel terrible. I just wanted him to know he was missed, but you have to understand the position that puts him in. He's trying to build his career, provide for his family, and you're making him feel guilty for working. It's not fair. Frank leaned forward. Jessica, it sounds like you've been thinking about this for a while. I have been. We all have. Marcus and I talk about it regularly, trying to figure out how to handle the situation without hurting Hattie's feelings. But it's gotten to the point where family gatherings are stressful for everyone, because we're all walking on eggshells, trying to manage her reactions. Frank's voice was carefully neutral. The way she gets emotional when people don't do things her way, the way she makes everything about her feelings, instead of what's actually best for the family. Like yesterday when I suggested we have dinner at the country club instead of here. A normal person would have said that sounds nice, or let me know how I can help, but Hattie immediately took it personally, like I was attacking her somehow. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. This was exactly what we'd hoped for, but hearing it was more painful than I'd expect. Maybe I am too sensitive, I said. You are, and I think part of the problem is that you've never had to share this family before. When the children were young, you were the only maternal figure in their lives. But now Marcus has a wife, David has a wife, and the grandchildren have mothers who want to be involved in their lives. You're not the only woman in the family anymore, and I don't think you've adjusted to that reality. The condescension in her voice was breathtaking. She was sitting in my living room, drinking my wine, and explaining to me how I was failing as a mother and grandmother, while positioning herself as the voice of reason. That makes sense, I said, though every word felt like swallowing glass. What do you think I should do differently? Jessica set down her wineglass and leaned forward, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. I think you need to step back significantly. Let Marcus and me handle our family's social calendar without your input. Stop offering unsolicited advice about the children. Don't insert yourself into conversations about our decisions or plans. Basically, learn to be a supporting character instead of always trying to be the star. A supporting character, I repeated. Exactly. You've had your time as the center of the family. Now it's time to let the next generation take over. It doesn't mean you're not loved or valued, just that your role is changing. Frank cleared his throat. And what would this new role look like exactly? Well, she could still attend some family functions, but not all of them. Maybe every other holiday, or special occasions only. And when she does attend, She needs to follow our lead instead of trying to take charge. Let other people make the decisions, plan the menus, set the agenda. What if Hattie wants to host something herself? Jessica's smile became sharper. Honestly, Frank, I think those days should be over. Hattie's hosting style is very old-fashioned, very formal. It doesn't really fit with the kind of casual, relaxed atmosphere Marcus and I are trying to create for our children. Plus, it puts pressure on everyone to dress up and behave a certain way, which isn't always comfortable for the kids. I wanted to scream. My old-fashioned hosting style had been creating warm, loving family memories for decades. But apparently, teaching children to appreciate tradition and take pride in their appearance was now considered oppressive. So no more family dinners here? I asked. Maybe for very special occasions, your anniversary, Frank's retirement party, things like that. But regular family gatherings should probably move to our house or neutral locations where everyone feels comfortable. And if I don't agree to these changes, Jessica's expression shifted, becoming cooler, more calculated. Then I think we'd have to consider whether it's healthy for you to be around the children at all. I mean, if you can't respect boundaries, or adapt to changing family dynamics, it might be better for everyone if you had limited contact until you're able to adjust. There it was, the threat I'd been waiting for: agree to be marginalized, or lose access to my grandchildren completely. You'd keep me away from Emma and Jake? I asked, letting genuine hurt creep into my voice. Not forever, but until you're able to interact with the family in a healthier way. Yeah, I have to protect my children from toxic dynamics, even if that means protecting them from their own grandmother. Frank's face had gone white. Toxic dynamics. I'm sorry, Frank, but that's what this is. Hattie's inability to accept that she's not in control anymore is creating an unhealthy environment for everyone. The children are starting to notice the tension, and I won't let them grow up thinking that kind of emotional manipulation is normal. I felt tears welling up in my eyes, and for once they were real. Hearing Jessica calmly explain how she planned to systematically remove me from my family's life, while making it sound like she was doing everyone a favor, was almost more than I could bear. I see, I said quietly. And Marcus agrees with all of this? Marcus loves you, but he also recognizes that change is necessary. He wants what's best for his children. And right now, that means setting clearer boundaries with extended family members who can't respect our parenting choices. Extended family members, Frank repeated. Well, yes, grandparents are extended family. The nuclear family is Marcus, me, and the children. Everyone else, including you two, are secondary relationships that need to be managed appropriately. The casual cruelty of reducing 32 years of marriage and decades of love to secondary relationships that need to be managed was staggering. But it was also exactly what we needed to hear. Jessica continued talking for another hour, outlining her vision for the family's future, explaining how much happier everyone would be once I learned to know my place, describing the ways she planned to modernize family traditions and create a healthier dynamic for the children. With every word, she revealed more of her true nature. The calculating manipulation, the complete lack of empathy, the stunning arrogance of believing she had the right to remake an entire family according to her preferences. When she finally left, around 10 o'clock, she hugged me at the door and told me how proud she was of me for being open to growth and change. This is going to be so good for everyone, she said, squeezing my hands. You'll see, once you adjust to your new role, you'll be much happier. Frank and I waited until her car disappeared down the street before we looked at each other. Then, without saying a word, Frank picked up his phone and stopped the recording. 2 hours and 37 minutes, he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. We got every word. I collapsed onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. Did you hear the part where she called us extended family, where she said I was toxic? I heard all of it. Frank sat down beside me and pulled me close. Hattie, I am so sorry. I knew she was manipulative, but I had no idea she was this calculating, this cruel. What do we do now? Frank was quiet for a moment, staring at his phone. Now we decide who needs to hear this recording. And then we let Jessica's own words destroy the lies she's been spreading about you. I closed my eyes, feeling a mixture of relief and dread. We had the evidence we needed, but using it would change everything. There would be no going back. No pretending that our family could return to the way it used to be. But as I thought about Jessica's smug confidence, her casual dismissal of my role in my own family, her threats to keep me away from my grandchildren, I knew we didn't have a choice. Jessica had declared war on me years ago. I was just finally ready to fight back. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Jessica's voice explaining how I needed to become a supporting character in my own family. Frank and I lay in bed, both staring at the ceiling, processing what we'd witnessed. Around 3 in the morning, he finally spoke. "We need to be strategic about this, Hattie. If we just start playing the recording for people, it could backfire. Jessica's smart enough to claim we manipulated her somehow, that we got her drunk or caught her at a vulnerable moment." I turned on my side to face him. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking we need allies. Before we reveal what we have, people who are already suspicious of Jessica, who will recognize the truth when they hear it. Like Carol. Like Carol. And maybe some of the other family members you talked to yesterday. If we can get them to confirm what they've observed independently, then play the recording to support their testimonies. It becomes much harder for Jessica to deny." We spent the next morning making phone calls, carefully reaching out to family members who had expressed concerns about Jessica's behavior. I started with Carol, who arrived at our house within an hour of my call, her face grim with determination. "I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday," she said as soon as she walked in, "and I remembered something else. Do you remember Marcus's promotion dinner last year? The one at that fancy steakhouse downtown?" I nodded. It had been a celebration of Marcus making partner at his law firm, a milestone Frank and I had been incredibly proud of. Jessica made a toast that night. Carol continued. She thanked everyone for coming to celebrate her husband's achievement, and talked about how proud she was of their family. But she never once mentioned you or Frank, even though you're the ones who put Marcus through law school, who supported him through the bar exam, who helped him get his foot in the door at that firm. I remember feeling invisible that night. I admitted. It was deliberate. She was establishing herself as the primary influence in Marcus's life, making sure everyone understood that his success was connected to her, not to you. And when you tried to add something about how proud you were of him, she cut you off and changed the subject. Frank came into the living room carrying coffee for all of us. "Carol, would you be willing to listen to something? We recorded a conversation with Jessica last night, and we think you should hear what she really thinks about our family." Carol's eyes widened. "You recorded her?" "She came here voluntarily," I explained. "We told her we wanted to discuss family dynamics, and she spent over 2 hours explaining exactly how she sees things. It's illuminating." Frank set up his phone and started the record. We watched Carol's face change as she listened to Jessica's voice outlining her plans for my marginalization. When Jessica started talking about toxic dynamics and threatening to limit my access to the grandchildren, Carol's hands clenched into fists. "That manipulative witch," Carol whispered when the recording ended. "She's been planning this for years, hasn't she? Systematically isolating you, turning Marcus against you, setting herself up as the new matriarch. That's exactly what she's been doing," Frank said. "And she's been so subtle about it that even we didn't see the full picture until recently." Carol stood up and started pacing. "We have to stop her. We have to show Marcus what his wife really is." "That's the problem," I said. "Marcus won't want to believe. She's been poisoning him against me for years, convincing him that I'm the problem. If we go to him with this recording, he might just think we're trying to sabotage his marriage." "Then we don't go to Marcus first," Carol said. "We go to Dave. He's not under Jessica's influence the same way Marcus is. If we can get David to understand what's happening, he can help us approach Marcus." It was a good plan, but I was terrified of involving Dave. He'd always been the peacekeeper in our family, the one who tried to smooth over conflicts rather than confront them. What if he decided that playing the recording was too cruel, too invasive? What if he sided with Jessica out of a desire to keep the family together? But Frank was already dialing David's number. David? It's Dad. Can you come over today? Your mother and I need to talk to you about something important. David arrived that afternoon looking worried and slightly defensive. What's this about? Marcus called me this morning saying Jessica was upset about something that happened here last night. My heart sank. Of course Jessica had gotten to him first, probably spinning some story about how Frank and I had been cruel to her, how we'd made her feel unwelcome. What did she tell him? Frank asked. She said you two seemed really angry about the dinner situation, and that you made her feel like she was to blame for family problems. She was crying. Apparently, Marcus is pretty upset about it. I felt the familiar stab of frustration. Even when we had evidence of Jessica's manipulation, she was still managing to control the narrative, still making herself look like the victim. David, I said carefully, we need you to listen to something before you make any judgments about what happened last night. Mom, I don't want to get in the middle of whatever's going on between you and Jessica. You're already in the middle, Frank said firmly. Jessica has been spreading lies about your mother, claiming she has dementia, saying she's becoming unstable. She's trying to isolate Hattie from the entire family, and it's time you knew the truth. David's face went pale. She said Mom has dementia, among other things. Carol interjected. Your mother recorded a conversation with Jessica last night, and what you're about to hear will shock you. We played the recording again, watching David's expression change from skepticism to horror to rage. When Jessica started talking about keeping me away from the grandchildren, he actually stood up and started pacing, just like Carol had done. This is sick, he said when the recording ended. She's talking about you like you're some kind of burden that needs to be managed, like you're not even part of the family. That's exactly how she sees me, I said. And she's been working on Marcus for years, convincing him to see me the same way. David sat back down, running his hands through his hair. I knew she was controlling, but I had no idea it was this calculated. The way she talks about managing relationships, about you being a supporting character. It's like she's directing a play instead of participating in a family. The question is, what do we do about it? Frank asked. David was quiet for a long moment, thinking. We can't go to Marcus with this directly. He's too emotionally invested in Jessica to be objective. But maybe we can create a situation where he sees her true nature for himself. What kind of situation? What if we gave Jessica exactly what she wants? What if we publicly stepped back, stopped hosting family events, stopped trying to be involved in decisions, but we do it in a way that makes it obvious to everyone else what's really happening? I frowned, not understanding where he was going with this. Think about it. David continued. Right now, Jessica can play the victim, claim that you're being controlling or difficult, but if you suddenly become completely passive, completely uninvolved, it will highlight how much she was actually the one driving all the conflict. Carol leaned forward, interested. You mean call her bluff? Exactly. She says she wants you to be a supporting character. Fine. Become so passive that everyone else starts to notice how weird the family dynamic becomes. Show up to events, but don't offer to help with anything. Don't bring food. Don't suggest activities for the grandchildren. Don't try to facilitate conversations. Just sit there and smile. That sounds horrible, I said. It will be horrible, but it will also be revealing. Jessica thrives on conflict, on having you to push against. If you remove yourself as a target, she'll have to find a new one, and chances are she'll overplay her hand. Frank nodded slowly. It's psychological warfare. We make Jessica think she's won, and then we watch her reveal her true nature to everyone else. But what about the recording? I asked. When do we use that? We save it for when Jessica does something that proves she's not the reasonable, caring person she pretends to be, David said. And trust me, she will. People like Jessica can't help themselves. Once they think they have complete control, they get sloppy. It was a risky plan, requiring me to essentially disappear from my own family, while waiting for Jessica to expose herself. But, as I thought about it, I realized it might be the only way to make people see what was really happening. There's something else we need to consider, Carol said. Rebecca, the waitress from the country club. She heard Jessica saying terrible things about Hattie to the family. We should get her statement in writing, in case we need it later. Frank nodded. And we should document everything from now on. Every interaction with Jessica, every family event where she displays controlling behavior, every lie she tells. We build a comprehensive case. Over the next week, we put the plan into action. When Marcus called to invite us to Emma's soccer game, I said we'd love to come but wouldn't be able to stay afterward for the usual post-game ice cream. When Jessica texted about planning Emma's birthday party, I simply replied that whatever she decided would be fine. When David asked if I wanted to host Sunday brunch like I usually did, I told him I thought it was time for someone else to take over hosting duties. The change in family dynamics was immediate and uncomfortable. At Emma's soccer game, I sat quietly in the bleachers while Jessica organized the other parents, distributed snacks, and took charge of the post-game celebration plan. When Emma scored a goal and looked over at the stands, I waved and smiled, but I didn't jump up and cheer like I normally would have. After the game, Emma ran over to me looking confused. "Grandma Hattie, aren't you coming for ice cream?" "Not today, sweetheart, but I'm so proud of how well you played. But you always come for ice cream." After my games, Jessica appeared beside us, her arms sliding around Emma's shoulders in a possessive gesture. "Grandma Hattie is tired today, honey, but we'll have a wonderful time without her." The casual cruelty of that statement, delivered in front of my granddaughter, made my stomach clench, but I just smiled and hugged Emma goodbye, ignoring the hurt confusion in her eyes. Marcus approached as I was gathering my things. "Mom, are you okay? You seem different lately." "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just trying to give you and Jessica more space to create your own family traditions." He frowned. "But you love coming to Emma's games, and you never miss the ice cream afterward." "Sometimes it's good to change things up," I said, hating every word. "You don't need me hovering all the time." Marcus looked like he wanted to say more, but Jessica called his name from across the field, and he reluctantly walked away. I could see him glancing back at me with a puzzled expression, and I knew the seed of doubt had been planted. The birthday party was even worse. Jessica had decided to have it at a children's entertainment center, one of those loud, chaotic places with arcade games and ball pits. It was the complete opposite of the quiet, intimate celebrations I'd always hosted for the grandchildren, with homemade cakes and thoughtful activities. I arrived on time, brought a gift Emma had specifically requested, and found a corner table where I could watch the festivities without getting in Jessica's way. For 2 hours I watched my daughter-in-law run around like a movie director, orchestrating every moment of the party while the children seemed overwhelmed by the noise and stimulation. Grandma Hattie, Jake, Emma's little brother, appeared at my table looking tired and cranky. "Can we go to your house instead? It's too loud here. We're having a lovely time here with Mommy's party," I said, though my heart was breaking. "Why don't you go play some games? But I want to make cookies like we do at your house. And I want to sit in the quiet room and read stories." Before I could respond, Jessica swooped down and scooped Jake up. "What are you doing? Bothering Grandma Hattie? She's trying to rest. Come on. Let's go play skee-ball." "I don't want to play skee-ball," Jake protested. "I want to go to Grandma's house." "Well, we're not going to Grandma's house today. Today is Emma's special day, and we're celebrating here." I watched Jessica carry my crying grandson away, and I saw several other family members exchanging uncomfortable glances. Carol caught my eye from across the room and raised her eyebrows questioningly. I just shrugged. maintaining my passive demeanor even though every instinct was screaming at me to rescue Jake and take him somewhere quiet. The breaking point came 3 weeks later, at what should have been Frank's birthday celebration. I'd always hosted Frank's birthday dinners, usually with a small group of close family and friends, his favorite meal, and a homemade cake. But this year, when I didn't immediately start planning something, Jessica took over. She organized a surprise party at a trendy downtown restaurant, inviting Frank's colleagues, distant relatives, and several people we barely knew. When I asked if I could bring Frank's favorite chocolate cake, she told me the restaurant was providing dessert and outside food wasn't allowed. The party was a disaster. Frank hated being the center of attention in public, and he was clearly uncomfortable with the loud music and unfamiliar faces. He kept looking around the room with a bewildered expression, probably wondering how his intimate birthday dinner had turned into a networking event. But the worst moment came when Jessica stood up to make a toast. She thanked everyone for coming to celebrate this milestone birthday, and talked about how important it was to honor our elder. She spoke about Frank like he was a beloved but distant relative rather than the patriarch of the family, and she never once mentioned our marriage or my role in his life. When she finished, there was polite applause, and then someone else stood up to speak, and another person, For 20 minutes, people shared stories about Frank's professional accomplishments, his community involvement, his friendships, but no one mentioned his family, his role as a husband and father, the personal relationships that had shaped his life. Finally, Marcus stood up. "I'd like to say something about my father as a family man," he began, and I felt a surge of hope. But then he continued, "Dad has always been supportive of me and Jessica, and he's been wonderful about adapting to changes in our family structure. He's shown real wisdom in stepping back and letting the younger generation take the lead." I felt like I'd been slapped. Marcus was publicly praising his father for marginalizing me, for accepting Jessica's version of family hierarchy. And Frank, my husband of 32 years, just sat there, nodding politely, while our son celebrated the dissolution of our role in the family. That's when David stood up. "Actually," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the restaurant, "I think we're missing something important here. We're talking about Dad like he's retiring from family life, but the truth is, he and Mom have been the foundation of this family for decades. They've hosted every holiday, remembered every birthday, supported every milestone. They've been married for 32 years, raised 2 successful sons, and created the loving environment that allowed all of us to thrive." The room went quiet. David continued, his voice growing stronger. "I don't know when we decided that getting older means becoming less important, or when we started treating our parents like they're just peripheral members of the family, but I think it's wrong. And I think Dad deserves a toast that acknowledges everything he's built, not just what he's supposedly given up." David raised his glass. "To Frank Williams, who taught me what it means to be a husband, a father, and a man. Happy birthday, Dad." The room erupted in applause, much more enthusiastic than it had been for Jessica's toast. I saw Frank's eyes fill with tears, and I had to bite my lip to keep from crying myself. But I also saw Jessica's face, and the expression there was pure fear. She'd been upstaged at her own party by a son calling out her subtle campaign to marginalize his parents. Her careful orchestration had been disrupted by someone pointing out what she was really doing. After the party, as we were all saying goodbye in the restaurant parking lot, Jessica cornered David near his car. I was standing close enough to hear their conversation, though I don't think she realized it. "That was completely inappropriate," she hissed at him. "You embarrassed me in front of everyone." "I embarrassed you." "How?" "By implying that I don't appreciate Frank and Hattie, by making it sound like I'm trying to push them out of the family." "Aren't you?" Jessica's mask slipped completely. "Your parents are old, David. They're from a different generation with different values. They don't understand modern family dynamics, and they resist change. I'm trying to help this family evolve, to create a healthier environment for the children, by excluding their grandparents, by setting appropriate boundaries. Your mother has been dominating family functions for decades, making everything about her preferences and her traditions. It's time for other people to have a voice. Other people like you, like me, like Marcus, like the actual parents of the children we're raising. Your parents had their turn. Now it's ours. David stared at her for a long moment. You know what, Jessica? You're right about one thing. It is time for things to change. But not in the way you think. He got in his car and drove away, leaving Jessica standing in the parking lot, looking rattled. She'd revealed herself to David exactly the way we'd hoped she would. But more importantly, she'd done it without any manipulation or setup from us. Her own arrogance and need for control had been her downfall. The next morning, David called me. I heard every word she said last night, Mom, and I think it's time the rest of the family heard the recording. Are you sure? I'm sure. She's gone too far, the way she talked about you and Dad last night, the way she's treating the grandchildren like props in her perfect family fantasy. Fine. It has to stop. We arranged a family meeting for the following Sunday, telling everyone we had something important to discuss. Marcus seemed reluctant to attend, probably warned by Jessica that we were planning some kind of confrontation, but David insisted it was necessary. As I prepared for what would either be the vindication I'd been waiting for, or the final destruction of my family, I thought about the passive role I'd been playing for the past month. It had been one of the hardest things I'd ever done, watching Jessica take control of my family while I sat quietly in the background. But it had also been revealing in ways I hadn't expected. Without me to push against, Jessica had become more obvious in her control tactics. Without my active participation to take for granted, family members had started noticing what was missing. Without my traditional role as hostess and organizer, the family dynamics had become awkward and uncomfortable in ways that highlighted how much I'd actually been contributing. Most importantly, Jessica had started making mistakes. She'd become overconfident, more obvious in her manipulation, more careless with her words. She'd revealed her true nature to David, and now it was time to show everyone else what we'd been dealing with. Sunday morning arrived gray and drizzling, matching my mood perfectly. Frank and I set up the living room with enough chairs for everyone, and I made coffee and put out some pastries, falling back into my hosting instincts, despite everything. Carol arrived first, followed by David and Sarah. Marcus and Jessica came in together, Jessica wearing a perfectly composed expression that didn't quite hide the wariness in her eyes. She knew something was coming, but she didn't know what. Thank you all for coming, Frank began once everyone was settled. Hattie and I have been doing some thinking about family dynamics lately, and we realized there are some things that need to be addressed. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. If this is about Jessica's party planning, I think you're making too big a deal out of it. It's not about party planning, David said. It's about honesty. About what's really been happening in this family for the past 5 years. Jessica's composure cracked slightly. I don't know what you mean. I think you do, Carol said quietly. We all do. Frank picked up his phone. Jessica, 3 weeks ago you came to our house to discuss family relationships. You spent over 2 hours explaining your vision for how this family should operate. We think everyone should hear what you had to say. Jessica's face went white. You recorded me. You were in our home, speaking freely about your plans for our family. We thought it was important to preserve your exact words. That's illegal. Actually, it's not, David said. Texas is a one-party consent state. As long as one person in the conversation knows it's being recorded, it's perfectly legal. Frank started the recording. For the next hour, we all listened to Jessica's voice, outlining her strategy for marginalizing me, threatening to limit my access to the grandchildren, describing me as toxic and manipulative, and positioning herself as the new authority figure in the family. The silence when the recording ended was deafening. Marcus sat frozen, staring at the phone like he couldn't believe what he'd just heard. Jessica's carefully constructed facade had crumbled completely, and she looked like a cornered animal. That's not, she started, then stopped. You don't understand the context. What context would make it okay to call my mother toxic? David asked. What context would justify threatening to keep her away from her own grandchildren? I was trying to help, Jessica said desperately. Your mother has been struggling, and I was trying to find a way to reduce the stress on everyone. By isolating her, by spreading lies about her mental health. Marcus finally spoke, his voice hollow. Is it true? Did you tell people Mom has dementia? Jessica's silence was answer enough. Oh my God, Marcus whispered. Jessica, how could you do this? I was protecting our family, she said, but her voice lacked conviction now. Your mother was becoming disruptive, and I was trying to manage the situation. Manage the situation. Carol's voice was sharp with anger. You were systematically destroying a woman's relationship with her own family. She was controlling everything, Jessica protested. She wouldn't let anyone else have a voice. So you decided to take away her voice completely. Frank's anger was quiet, but unmistakable. You decided that you had the right to remake our entire family according to your preferences. Marcus stood up abruptly. I need to think about this. I need to process what I just heard. Marcus, please. Jessica reached for his arm, but he pulled away. No, I can't. I need space. I need to figure out how I didn't see this happening. He walked out of the house without another word, leaving Jessica sitting alone in a room full of people who now knew exactly what she was. Well, David said into the silence. I think that went about as well as we could have hoped. Jessica stood up slowly, her composure completely shattered. This isn't over, she said, looking directly at me. You think you've won something, but you haven't. Marcus will come back to me. He always does. Maybe, I said quietly. But it won't be the same, will it? He'll always know what you're really capable of. Jessica left without another word, and I sank back into my chair, emotionally exhausted. We'd exposed the truth, but I wasn't sure what came next. Marcus was devastated. My grandchildren were caught in the middle, and our family was more fractured than ever. But for the first time in years, people knew who Jessica really was, and that felt like the beginning of something, even if I wasn't sure what that something would be. The silence that followed Jessica's departure stretched for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Carol was the first to speak, her voice trembling with emotion. Hattie, I am so sorry. I knew something was wrong, but I had no idea it was this systematic, this cruel. David moved to sit closer to me, reaching for my hand. Mom, how did you stay so calm through all of this? If someone had been doing that to Sarah, I would have lost my mind. I looked around the room at these people who loved me, who had finally seen the truth I'd been living with for years. Because losing my mind wouldn't have helped anything. Jessica thrives on drama, on emotional reactions she can use against you. The only way to beat someone like that is to stay rational, stay strategic. Frank was staring out the window, watching the rain that had started falling heavier. I keep thinking about all the times I told you to just ignore her, to rise above it. I thought I was being supportive, but I was actually enabling her to continue hurting you. You couldn't have known, I said, though part of me had resented his passive approach for years. She was very good at making her attacks look like misunderstandings or personality conflicts. Sarah, who had been quiet throughout the entire revelation, finally spoke up. What happens now? I mean, Marcus heard everything, but what if he goes back to her? What if he decides to forgive her, and expects everyone else to just move on? It was the question we were all thinking, but nobody wanted to voice. Marcus had looked devastated when he left, but Jessica was his wife, the mother of his children. People had forgiven worse things to keep their families together. Then we'll deal with that when it happens, David said firmly, but at least now everyone knows the truth. She can't continue manipulating people if they're aware of what she's doing. Over the next few days, I waited for some kind of contact from Marcus, a phone call, a text, anything that would give me insight into what he was thinking, but my phone remained silent. Frank tried calling him twice, but both calls went to voicemail. It was Emma who finally broke the silence, showing up at my door on Wednesday afternoon, with her backpack and her favorite stuffed animal. Grandma Hattie, she said when I opened the door, Daddy said I could come visit you. He's at Uncle David's house talking about grown-up things. My heart leaped. If Marcus had brought Emma here, it meant he was at least considering reconciliation, but I tried to keep my expression neutral. Of course, sweetheart. Come in. Are you hungry? As Emma settled at the kitchen table with a glass of milk and some cookies I'd made that morning, she looked around with obvious relief. I missed your house, Grandma. Mommy's been really upset lately, and she keeps crying and making phone calls. I felt a pang of sympathy for Jessica. Despite everything, having your manipulation exposed in front of your entire family couldn't be easy, even if it was deserved. Sometimes grown-ups go through difficult times, I said carefully. It doesn't mean anything is your fault. I know. Daddy explained that sometimes people make mistakes and hurt other people's feelings, and then they have to figure out how to fix it. Smart girl. And it sounded like Marcus was trying to explain the situation in age-appropriate terms, which gave me hope that he was thinking clearly about what came next. Can we make cookies like we used to? Emma asked. The ones with the chocolate chips and the nuts. Of course we can. We spent the afternoon baking and talking about school, her friends, her upcoming dance recital, normal grandmother-granddaughter activities that I'd been missing terribly. When Marcus came to pick her up around 6, he looked exhausted but calmer than he had on Sunday. Hi, Mom, he said, accepting my offer of coffee and sitting at the kitchen table where Emma had been just hours before. Hi, sweetheart. How are you holding up? He rubbed his face with both hands. I keep replaying conversations from the past few years, looking for signs I missed. And they're everywhere, Mom. I just didn't want to see them. It's not your fault. She was very good at making her behavior seem reasonable. But it wasn't reasonable, was it? The way she talked about you in that recording. The things she said about Dad. About the kid. I married someone I don't even recognize. I wanted to reach across the table and hug him, but I sensed he needed space to process this revelation on his own terms. What are you going to do? I don't know yet. I told her I needed time to think, that I was staying at a hotel for a few days. She's been calling and texting constantly, alternating between apologies and accusations. She keeps saying you manipulated me into turning against her. Even now, she's trying to make herself the victim. I know, and that's what scares me the most. Even caught red-handed, she can't admit what she did was wrong. She's still trying to control the narrative. Marcus was quiet for a moment, staring into his coffee cup. I keep thinking about Emma and Jake. They love Jessica, and she is a good mother to them most of the time. But I can't let them grow up thinking it's normal to treat people the way she treated you. Whatever you decide, we'll support you, I said. But Marcus, you need to know that this can't go back to the way it was before. Even if you forgive Jessica, even if you decide to work things out, there have to be boundaries. She can't be allowed to isolate family members or spread lies about people. I know, I've been thinking about that too. If we stay together, things would have to change completely. Family therapy, clear boundaries, consequences, if she crosses lines again. And if you don't stay together. Marcus looked up at me with eyes that reminded me of the little boy who used to crawl into my lap when he was scared. Then I'd need help figuring out how to co-parent with someone I'm not sure I can trust. We talked for another hour before Emma got restless and started asking to go home. As they were leaving, Marcus hugged me, tighter than he had in years. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry I let this happen to you. You didn't let anything happen. You were trying to be a good husband and keep your family together. Those are admirable instincts, even when they're misguided. I love you. I love you too, sweetheart. Always. 2 days later, Jessica called me. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Hattie, she said, her voice carefully modulated. I was hoping we could talk. About what? About fixing this situation. About finding a way to move forward that works for everyone. I could hear the calculation in her voice, the way she was choosing her words carefully. Even now, she was strategizing, looking for an angle that would let her regain control. I'm listening. I think we both made mistakes. I may have been too direct in expressing my concerns about family dynamics, and perhaps you felt attacked when that wasn't my intention. Amazing. She was trying to reframe her systematic campaign of isolation and character assassination as a simple miscommunication. Jessica, I heard the recording. We all did. You weren't expressing concerns, you were outlining a plan to marginalize me and limit my relationship with my grandchildren. That's not how I meant it to sound, but it's how it sounded. And more importantly, it's what you've been doing for the past 5 years. There was a long pause. Hattie, I know you're angry, but we need to think about what's best for the children. Emma and Jake need stability, and this family conflict is hurting them. You're right, they do need stability, but they also need to grow up in a family where people treat each other with respect and honesty. I can do better. I can change. Can you? Because changing would mean acknowledging that what you did was wrong, and you're still trying to justify it. Another pause. Longer this time. What do you want from me? I want you to admit what you did. I want you to apologize to the people you hurt. And I want you to commit to never using the children as weapons in adult conflicts. And if I do those things, then maybe we can find a way to coexist peacefully. But Jessica, trust is something that's earned back slowly. It can't be fixed with one conversation. She hung up without saying goodbye, and I knew she'd called hoping for an easy solution, a way to smooth things over without having to genuinely confront her behavior. When I didn't give her that, she'd given up. The following week brought more development. Marcus called to tell me he'd filed for separation and was looking for his own apartment. He'd also started individual therapy to help him process what had happened and figure out what he wanted for his future. I'm not ready to make permanent decisions yet, he explained, but I need space to think clearly, and I can't do that while Jessica is constantly trying to influence my perspective. David and Sarah offered to help him find a place, and Carol volunteered to watch the children whenever he needed support. For the first time in years, our family was rallying around each other instead of walking on eggshells around Jessica's moods and manipulations. But Jessica wasn't going down without a fight. She hired a lawyer and started making demands about custody, support, and division of assets. She also began a campaign to rehabilitate her image, reaching out to mutual friends and extended family members with her version of events. According to Jessica's narrative, she was a concerned daughter-in-law who had tried to address legitimate issues with an aging mother-in-law's behavior. She claimed that I had been becoming increasingly difficult and demanding, that Frank and I had manipulated Marcus into turning against her, and that the recording had been taken out of context. Some people believed her. Jessica was charming and persuasive, and her version of events played into existing assumptions about family dynamics and generational conflicts. A few of Marcus's colleagues' wives reached out to express sympathy for what she was going through, but most of the people who knew our family well weren't buying it. They'd seen Jessica's behavior firsthand, even if they hadn't understood the full scope of it before, and word of the recording spread, creating a broader awareness of what had really been happening. The most surprising supporter came from an unexpected source. Marcus's law firm had a family counselor on retainer for employees dealing with personal issues, and she reached out to me directly after hearing about the situation. "Miss Williams," she said, when she called, "I hope you don't mind me contacting you, but I've been working with Marcus, and with his permission, I'd like to offer you some resources." "What kind of resource?" "Information about emotional abuse patterns, support groups for people who've experienced family manipulation, and strategies for rebuilding relationships after trust has been damaged." The phrase emotional abuse hit me like a physical blow. I'd been thinking of Jessica's behavior as manipulation, control, psychological warfare, but hearing a professional label it as abuse made me realize how much damage had actually been done. "I'd appreciate any information you can provide. I'd also like to suggest that you consider counseling for yourself. What you've been through is traumatic, and having professional support can be invaluable as you navigate the healing process." I found a therapist who specialized in family trauma, and our first session was both enlightening and devastating. She helped me understand that what Jessica had done wasn't just meanness or selfishness. It was a calculated pattern of emotional abuse, designed to isolate me from my support system and destroy my sense of self-worth. Abusers often target people who are naturally accommodating and conflict-averse, she explained. They know these individuals will bend over backward to avoid confrontation, which makes them easy to manipulate. But I fought back eventually. "Yes, and that's significant. Many people never reach that point. You recognized what was happening, documented it, and took action to protect yourself and your family. That took tremendous courage. The validation was overwhelming. For years I'd wondered if I was overreacting, if Jessica's behavior was really as bad as it seemed, if I was being too sensitive or too controlling myself. Having a professional confirm that my perceptions were accurate and my responses were appropriate felt like being given permission to trust my own judgment again. Meanwhile, the practical implications of Marcus's separation were creating new challenges. Jessica was fighting for primary custody of the children, claiming that Marcus was having an emotional breakdown and wasn't capable of making rational decisions about their welfare. She was also demanding spousal support and a significant portion of Marcus's assets, arguing that she'd sacrificed her own career to support his professional advancement. It wasn't entirely untrue, but the way she was weaponizing legitimate concerns about financial security felt like another manipulation. Marcus was struggling with guilt about the impact on Emma and Jay. They were confused about why Daddy wasn't living at home anymore, why Mommy was crying all the time, and why family gatherings felt so tense and awkward. "I don't want to turn them against their mother," Marcus told me during one of our weekly coffee meetings, "but I also don't want them to think that the way she treated you was acceptable. You don't have to turn them against her, just teach them to recognize healthy versus unhealthy behavior. Help them understand that love doesn't mean accepting mistreatment. It's so complicated." Jessica is a good mother in many ways. She's attentive, involved in their activities, protective of them. It's only when she feels threatened or challenged that she becomes manipulative. That's actually more dangerous than someone who's consistently abusive, my therapist had told me. Intermittent reinforcement creates stronger psychological bonds and makes the abuse harder to recognize and leave. I shared this insight with Marcus, and I could see him processing the implication. He was starting to understand that Jessica's good moments didn't cancel out her bad ones, and that protecting the children might require some difficult decisions about their living situation. The custody evaluation process was particularly challenging. Jessica had coached the children on what to say, subtly planting ideas about how sad Mommy was and how much better their life was when Daddy lived at home. Emma started asking me why I'd made Daddy leave, clearly repeating questions Jessica had posed to her. "Sometimes parents need time apart to figure out how to be better partners," I explained. "It doesn't mean anyone did anything wrong, and it doesn't mean Daddy doesn't love you, but Mommy says you made him choose between us and you." My heart broke. Jessica was already using the children as weapons, trying to force Marcus back by making him feel guilty about the impact on Emma and Jake. "Sweetheart, nobody should ever have to choose between loving their children and loving their parents. Families work best when everyone treats each other with kindness and respect. Will Daddy come home if you say you're sorry to Mommy?" The manipulation was breathtaking. Jessica had convinced a 7-year-old that I was the obstacle to her parents' reconciliation, that if I would just apologize for defending myself, everything would go back to normal. "The problems between Mommy and Daddy are grown-up problems that grown-ups have to solve," I said. "Nothing you do or say will change what happens, and it's not your job to fix things between them." I reported this conversation to Marcus, who was horrified but not entirely surprised. "She's been having a lot of private conversations with them lately," he said. "Whenever I try to join in, she says they're having special Mommy time." The family court system moved slowly but gradually. A clearer picture emerged. The court-appointed child psychologist noted that Emma and Jake showed signs of being coached, and that their responses to questions about their parents seemed rehearsed rather than natural. Jessica's own behavior during the evaluation process worked against her. She couldn't resist trying to control every aspect of the proceedings, questioning the psychologist's qualifications, demanding to review her notes, and making veiled threats about what would happen if the evaluation didn't go her way. "Your daughter-in-law is her own worst enemy," Marcus's lawyer told him. "The more she tries to manipulate the system, the more obvious it becomes that she has serious boundary issues." 6 months after the family meeting where we'd played the recording, Marcus was awarded temporary primary custody of the children, with Jessica getting supervised visitation until she completed anger management and family therapy program. The supervised visitation requirement particularly infuriated Jessica, who saw it as a public humiliation and blamed me for poisoning the court against her. She violated the order twice, attempting to take the children from school without permission, which resulted in even stricter supervision requirements. "She's escalating," my therapist warned me. When people with control issues feel their power slipping away, they often become more desperate and unpredictable. The warning proved prescient. 2 weeks later, Jessica showed up at my house unannounced, ringing the doorbell repeatedly, and then pounding on the door when I didn't answer immediately. "Hattie," she shouted through the door. "I know you're in there. We need to talk." I called Frank at work and then dialed 911, reporting a disturbance. Jessica was still pounding on the door when the police arrived, demanding that I come outside and face her like an adult. The officers spoke with her calmly but firmly, explaining that she couldn't harass people at their homes, and that I had the right to refuse to speak with her. They escorted her off the property and warned her about trespassing laws, but the incident shook me more than I wanted to admit. For the first time, Jessica had dropped her mask of civility completely, revealing the rage that had always been lurking underneath her carefully controlled exterior. "She's dangerous," Carol said when I told her what had happened. "Maybe not physically, but emotionally. She's not going to accept losing control quietly." Frank wanted to get a restraining order, but Marcus's lawyer advised against it. "It might look like you're trying to interfere with her relationship with the children," he explained. "Better to document everything and let her behavior speak for itself." So we documented every angry phone call, every violation of custody agreements, every attempt to manipulate the children or turn them against their father. The pattern was clear and consistent. Jessica couldn't accept that her actions had consequences, and she was willing to hurt anyone, including her own children, to regain control. The final custody hearing was scheduled for early December, almost exactly a year after the family dinner where Jessica had first tried to exclude me. As we prepared for what would likely be the last major battle in this war, I reflected on how much had changed. Marcus was stronger, more confident in his decisions, no longer walking on eggshells around his ex-wife's moods. Emma and Jake were adjusting to their new normal, spending weekdays with their father and alternate weekends with their mother under supervision. The family gatherings were smaller but more peaceful, without the underlying tension that had characterized them for years, and I was different too. Stronger, more assertive, less willing to sacrifice my own needs to avoid conflict. The passive woman who had sat quietly while Jessica undermined her had been replaced by someone who understood her own worth and wouldn't accept mistreatment. The week before the hearing, Marcus asked me to meet him for lunch. He looked nervous but determined, and I sensed he had something important to tell me. "I've been thinking about the future," he said after we'd ordered. "About what kind of family I want Emma and Jake to grow up in, what kind of values I want to model for them. What conclusions have you reached? That I want them to see adults who treat each other with respect, who stand up for what's right, who protect the people they love. I want them to see their grandmother, valued and appreciated, for everything she's contributed to this family." I felt tears welling up in my eyes. "Marcus, let me finish. I've decided to ask for full custody. Not just primary custody but full legal and physical custody with Jessica getting limited supervised visitation." I was stunned. "Are you sure? That's a big step." "I'm sure. She's proven she can't put the children's needs ahead of her own anger. She's tried to use them as weapons. She's violated court orders. She's shown no genuine remorse for the damage she's caused. I can't keep exposing them to that kind of instability. What does your lawyer think?" "He thinks we have a strong case, the documentation we've gathered, the psychologist report, the pattern of escalating behavior. It all supports the argument that she's not capable of co-parenting effectively." I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Whatever happens, I'm proud of you for putting the children first. I learned that from you. You've always put family first, even when it cost you personally. I should have seen that years ago." The custody hearing was scheduled to last 2 days, but Jessica's behavior on the first day made the judge's decision much easier. She interrupted proceedings repeatedly, argued with her own lawyer, and at one point stood up to accuse me of brainwashing her husband and children. The judge warned her twice about courtroom decorum before finally holding her in contempt. By the end of the day, it was clear that Marcus would get everything he'd asked for. Jessica's final act of desperation came the next morning. She didn't show up for the second day of hearings, instead, sending her lawyer a letter withdrawing her custody petition and announcing her intention to move out of state. She's abandoning the children rather than accepting a supervised relationship with them, Marcus's lawyer explained. It's actually the best possible outcome for your family, but it's devastating for Emma and Jake, and it was devastating. Emma cried for weeks, unable to understand why Mommy had left without saying goodbye. Jake regressed to bedwetting and nightmares, his 7-year-old mind unable to process the abandonment, but slowly, with therapy and patience, and the support of a family that had finally learned to prioritize truth over peacekeeping, the children began to heal. They started spending more time at my house again, helping me bake cookies and listening to stories about their father's childhood. On Christmas morning, almost exactly 1 year after Jessica had first tried to exclude me from family gatherings, I woke up in my own home preparing to host Christmas breakfast for my children, grandchildren, and extended family. The house smelled like cinnamon rolls and coffee, the tree was surrounded by carefully wrapped presents, and for the first time in years, I wasn't walking on eggshells wondering what mood someone else might be in. Emma helped me set the table while Jake arranged the presents under the tree. They still missed their mother, and probably always would, but they were learning what it felt like to live in a home where love wasn't conditional on perfect behavior. As the family gathered in my living room, opening presents, and sharing stories and laughing without the underlying tension that had poisoned so many previous celebrations, I thought about the woman who had tried to erase me from this picture. Jessica had taught me something valuable, though I doubted that was her intention. She'd shown me that some battles are worth fighting, that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, and that sometimes the people who claim to love you are the ones who hurt you most. But she'd also shown me how strong I really was, how much fight I had left in me when it mattered. She'd underestimated the quiet woman who cleaned house and made cookies and kept everyone's secrets. She'd assumed that years of accommodation meant weakness. She'd been wrong about that, just like she'd been wrong about everything else. And now, watching my family celebrate together in the home I'd fought to protect, I knew that sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to disappear. Spring arrived early that year, and with it came a sense of renewal I hadn't experienced in decades. The dogwood trees in my backyard bloomed white and pink, the same trees Richard and I had planted when we first bought this house 35 years ago. Frank and I had finalized our divorce in February, an amicable process that surprised everyone who knew us. We'd discovered that fighting together against Jessica had reminded us why we'd fallen in love in the first place, but it had also made clear that we'd grown into different people who wanted different things from the years we had left. Frank moved into a downtown condo and started dating a woman named Margaret, who shared his passion for sailing. I kept the house and began the process of making it truly mine for the first time in my adult life. I painted the kitchen a warm yellow that Jessica had once criticized as too bold, replaced the formal dining room furniture with a cozy breakfast nook, and converted Richard's old study into an art studio where I could pursue the watercolor painting I'd abandoned decades ago. The most significant change was hosting Sunday dinners again, but on my terms. Instead of the elaborate formal meals I'd stressed over for years, I started cooking simple, comfort food dishes, and inviting whoever wanted to come. Sometimes it was just David and Sarah with their kids. Sometimes Carol brought her new boyfriend. Sometimes it was Marcus and Emma and Jake, still healing but growing stronger every week. The children had adjusted better than anyone expected. Jake had stopped having nightmares and started calling me every day after school to tell me about his day. Emma, now 8, had become fiercely protective of our family gatherings, always asking who was coming to Sunday dinner and making sure everyone knew they were welcome. "Grandma Hattie," she said one afternoon as we worked in the garden together, "I'm glad Mommy went away." The statement hit me like a physical blow. I stopped weeding and looked at her seriously. "Sweetheart, it's okay to have complicated feelings about your mommy. You can miss her and also be relieved that things are calmer now. I do miss her sometimes, but I don't miss being scared that I would say the wrong thing and make her angry, and I don't miss how sad Daddy always looked when she was around." The wisdom in her young voice broke my heart. Children see everything, even when adults think they're protecting them from difficult truths. "Your daddy is much happier now," I agreed. "And so are you and Jake. Are you happier too?" I considered the question carefully. Was I happier? I was certainly more at peace, more confident, more myself than I'd been in years. But there was also grief for the family we could have been, sadness for the relationships that had been damaged, regret for the time we'd lost to Jessica's manipulations. I'm different now, I said finally. Stronger, I think, and yes, in many ways happy. Emma nodded solemnly, as if this made perfect sense to her. Then she went back to planting marigolds with the focused determination that reminded me so much of Marcus at that age. Marcus had surprised everyone by not only surviving his divorce, but thriving in ways none of us had expected. He'd started therapy, joined a divorced dad's support group, and even began dating someone new, a kind woman named Lisa, who worked as a children's librarian, and treated Emma and Jake like they were the most interesting people she'd ever met. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, he confessed to me one evening as we watched the kids play in the backyard, for her to demand something from Lisa, to find fault with how she interacts with Emma and Jake. That's Jessica's pattern, not Lisa's, I reminded him. Not every woman wants to control and manipulate everyone around her. I know that intellectually, but it's hard to trust my judgment about people after being so wrong about Jessica. You weren't wrong about who Jessica could be. You were wrong about who she chose to be. There's a difference. The legal aftermath of the custody battle had been surprisingly clean. Jessica had moved to California and married a man she'd met online within 6 months of leaving Texas. She sent birthday cards to Emma and Jake twice a year, called them on major holidays, and otherwise seemed content to build a new life that didn't include the messy reality of actually parenting children. It's probably for the best, David said during one of our family dinners. The kids are too young to understand why she left, but they're old enough to remember that life became more peaceful after she was gone. I'd started seeing a different therapist, one who specialized in helping people rebuild their sense of self after psychological abuse. Dr. Tricia Santos was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, who helped me understand that recovery wasn't just about moving on from what Jessica had done, but about rediscovering who I was underneath all the accommodating and peacekeeping I'd done for so many years. You spent decades making yourself smaller to avoid conflict, she explained during one of our sessions. Now you need to learn how to take up space again, how to have opinions and preferences without apologizing for them. It was harder than it sounded. I'd catch myself starting to say, I don't care, whatever you prefer, when someone asked me what restaurant I wanted to try, or what movie I wanted to see. I had to consciously practice having preferences and expressing them clearly. The first time I told Carol I didn't want to go to her book club's monthly wine tasting because I found the group pretentious and boring, she stared at me in shock. I've been inviting you to those events for 3 years, and you never said you didn't enjoy them. I was being polite, but Dr. Santos says I need to practice being honest about what I actually want, instead of just going along with what other people suggest. Carol laughed, the kind of surprised, delighted laugh that told me she approved of this new version of me. Good for you. Those women are pretentious and boring. I only go because my neighbor organizes them, and I feel obligated. We ended up starting our own book club, just the two of us, where we read whatever we wanted, and discussed books over coffee in my kitchen instead of wine in someone's formal living room. It was infinitely more enjoyable. The most unexpected development came in late summer when I received a phone call from Rebecca Chen, the waitress from the country club, who had first alerted me to Jessica's lies about my mental health. Mrs. Williams, I hope you remember me. I served your family's table last year and called you about some things I overheard. Of course I remember you, Rebecca. How are you? I'm well, thank you. I'm actually calling because I've left the restaurant business and started working for a nonprofit that helps seniors who are experiencing family abuse or manipulation. I was wondering if you might be interested in sharing your story with other women who are going through similar situations. The idea terrified and intrigued me in equal measure. Talk to strangers about the most painful period of my life. Share intimate details about family dysfunction with people I'd never met. But as I thought about it, I realized how isolating the experience had been. How many nights I'd lain awake wondering if I was overreacting, if Jessica's behavior was really as bad as it seemed, if I was the problem. How valuable it would have been to talk to someone who had been through something similar. What would that look like? We host monthly support groups for family members who've experienced psychological abuse or manipulation. Sometimes we have guest speakers who share their stories and the strategies they use to protect themselves. The meetings are confidential, and you'd only share what you're comfortable sharing. I agreed to think about it, and that night I called Dr. Santos to discuss the opportunity. It could be very healing for you, she said. Helping other people often helps us process our own experiences more fully, but you should only do it if you feel genuinely ready, not out of obligation. 2 weeks later, I found myself sitting in a community center conference room with 12 women ranging in age from their 40s to their 80s. Rebecca introduced me as someone who had successfully stood up to family manipulation and protected her relationships with her children and grandchildren. I told my story simply and honestly, starting with Jessica's gradual campaign to isolate me and ending with the custody battle and her eventual departure from our lives. I talked about the recording, the family meeting, the months of legal proceedings, and the ongoing process of rebuilding trust and healing relationships. The questions afterward were thoughtful and heartbreaking. Women whose adult children had cut them off based on lies told by manipulative partners. Grandmothers who were being denied access to grandchildren because they'd questioned their children's spouses' treatment of them. Mothers who were being systematically erased from family gatherings and important events. How did you find the courage to fight back? Asked a woman named Dorothy, whose daughter-in-law had convinced her son that Dorothy was becoming too difficult to include in family activity. I realized that not fighting back wasn't actually keeping the peace, I said. It was just allowing someone else's dysfunction to destroy my family. Sometimes you have to be willing to cause a disruption in order to save what matters most. But what if I lose my relationship with my son completely? Then you'll know you did everything you could to preserve it with integrity and tact, and you'll also know that the relationship you thought you had wasn't real anymore. After the meeting, several women approached me with their own stories, their own struggles with family members who seemed determined to erase them from important relationships. I realized that Jessica's behavior hadn't been unique or even unusual. There were many people out there who saw families as territories to be conquered rather than communities to be nurtured. I started attending the support group regularly, sometimes as a participant, and sometimes as a guest speaker. Dr. Santos was right about the healing power of helping others. Each time I shared my story, I felt stronger, more confident in the choices I'd made, and the boundaries I'd established. The holidays that year were different from any I'd experienced before. Instead of the elaborate, stressful productions I'd organized for decades, I hosted a simple Christmas Eve gathering where everyone brought something to share, and we focused on enjoying each other's company rather than impressing anyone. Emma and Jake helped me decorate cookies, while Marcus and Lisa worked on a jigsaw puzzle in the living room. David and Sarah brought their twins, now toddlers, who turned my orderly kitchen into a delightful chaos of flour and laughter. Frank stopped by with Margaret, and we all marveled at how comfortable it felt to be in the same room together as friends, rather than bitter ex-spouses. "This is nice," Carol said as we cleaned up afterward, relaxed. It's what I should have been doing all along instead of trying to create perfect magazine-worthy celebrations that stressed everyone out. You were doing what you thought you were supposed to do, what society told you a good hostess and grandmother should do. As everyone prepared to leave, Emma pulled me aside with a small wrapped package. "I made this for you," she said, her face serious with the importance of the moment. Inside was a framed drawing of our family, stick figures holding hands in front of a house that looked remarkably like mine. Everyone was labeled in her careful 8-year-old handwriting: Daddy, Jake, Emma, Uncle David, Aunt Sarah, and in the center, larger than the others, Grandma Hattie. "This is beautiful, sweetheart. I'm going to hang it in my kitchen. I drew you in the middle because you're the one who keeps everyone together," she explained. "Even when some people try to pull us apart." I hugged her tightly, marveling at the resilience of children and their ability to understand complex emotional dynamics, even when adults try to shield them from difficulty. After everyone left, I sat in my living room with a cup of tea, looking at Emma's drawing, and reflecting on the year that had changed everything. 12 months ago, I'd been a woman who accepted mistreatment in the name of keeping peace, who diminished herself to avoid conflict, who allowed someone else's dysfunction to dictate the terms of her most important relationship. Now I was someone who set boundaries, who spoke up when something felt wrong, who prioritized truth over comfort. I was someone who understood that love didn't require accepting abuse, that family meant protecting each other rather than enabling each other's worst impulse. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Marcus, calling from his car as he drove home. "I just wanted to thank you for tonight, Mom, for everything, really. I know this year has been difficult for all of us, but I think we're all better for having gone through it. Even the children, especially the children, they're learning what healthy relationships look like, what it means to be part of a family that actually supports each other." Emma told me tonight that she feels safer now, that she doesn't have to worry about making people angry just by being herself. After we hung up, I thought about safety and what it meant in the context of family relationships. For too many years, none of us had been truly safe in our own family. We'd all been walking on eggshells, monitoring our words and actions, to avoid triggering Jessica's anger or manipulation. Now, for the first time in years, we could all be ourselves without fear of punishment or retaliation. We could disagree with each other without worrying about being cut off from important relationships. We could express our needs and preferences without having them twisted into evidence of our selfishness or dysfunction. A year later, I received an unexpected letter. It was from Jessica, postmarked from San Diego, written on expensive stationery in her familiar, precise handwriting. "Dear Hattie," she wrote, "I've been in therapy for the past year, and my counselor suggested I write letters to people I've hurt as part of my healing process. I want you to know that I understand now that my behavior toward you was wrong and harmful. I was threatened by your relationship with Marcus and the children, and instead of dealing with my insecurities in a healthy way, I tried to eliminate the source of my discomfort by pushing you out of the family. I know my apology doesn't undo the damage I caused, but I want you to know that I recognize what I did, and I'm working to become a better person. I hope you and the family are well." I read the letter twice, then showed it to Dr. Santos during my next appointment. "How does receiving this make you feel?" she asked. "Validated, I suppose. It's good to have her acknowledge what she did, but also suspicious. It feels too neat, too convenient, like she's checking a box on her recovery to-do list rather than genuinely grappling with the harm she caused. What would genuine accountability look like to you?" I thought about it for a long time. Genuine accountability would mean understanding that the harm she caused to Emma and Jake can't be fixed with a letter. It would mean accepting that she forfeited her right to be part of our lives when she chose to use the children as weapons in her campaign against me. And if she asked to reconnect with the family, then I would say that forgiveness doesn't require giving someone another opportunity to hurt you. I can forgive Jessica for my own peace of mind without trusting her with access to my family again. I never responded to Jessica's letter, and I didn't share it with Marcus or the children. Some doors, once closed, should stay closed for everyone's safety and well-being. Instead, I focused on the life I was building, the relationships I was nurturing, the woman I was becoming. I continued with therapy, maintained my involvement in the support group, and gradually expanded my social circle to include people who appreciated me for who I was, rather than who they wanted me to be. I started taking art classes at the community college, and discovered I had a talent for botanical illustration. I joined a hiking group for seniors, and learned that I was stronger and more adventurous than I'd given myself credit for. I even started dating occasionally, though I was in no hurry to enter another serious relationship. The most important change was in my relationship with myself. I no longer felt the need to justify my choices or apologize for taking up space. I'd learned to trust my instincts, to speak up when something felt wrong, to prioritize my own well-being alongside the needs of others. Emma and Jake continued to thrive in their new normal. Emma started middle school with confidence and made friends easily, no longer the anxious child who worried about saying the wrong thing. Jake joined Little League, and discovered a love of baseball that reminded me of Marcus at that age. Marcus and Lisa married in a small ceremony in my backyard the following spring, with Emma and Jake serving as maid of honor and best man. It was everything Marcus's first wedding hadn't been: intimate, authentic, focused on the love between two people rather than the performance of perfection. As I watched them exchange vows under the dogwood trees that Frank and I had planted decades earlier, I reflected on the journey that had brought us all to this moment. The pain of Jessica's manipulation had been real and lasting,
but it had also revealed strengths in our family that we might never have discovered otherwise. We'd learned that love sometimes requires difficult conversations, that protecting someone can mean confronting uncomfortable truths, that peace isn't always the absence of conflict but sometimes the presence of justice. Most importantly, we'd learned that families aren't defined by blood or law or tradition, but by the choice to show up for each other, to tell the truth even when it's hard, and to protect what matters most even when it costs us something. Standing in my garden that day, surrounded by the people who had chosen to fight for our family rather than enable its destruction, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: complete peace with who I was and the choices I'd made. Jessica had tried to erase me, to make me disappear from my own life and family. Instead, she'd helped me discover exactly who I was when I stopped trying to be who everyone else wanted me to be. I was Hattie Williams, grandmother and mother and friend, a woman who had learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to accept the unacceptable. A woman who had discovered that you're never too old to stand up for yourself, never too set in your ways to grow and change, never too invested in keeping peace to fight for what's right. And that, I thought as I watched my family celebrate love and new beginnings in the home I'd fought to protect, was exactly who I wanted to be. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.